All right, we're just gonna get started. Welcome. My name is Dr. Tianyi Xie. I'm one of the associate directors at University Counseling Service. I oversee outreach and prevention services. And today we're going to talk to you a little bit more about how to empowering your students and supporting their well-being in college as a parent or as a caretaker. And throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to type your question in the Q&A section, and I will answer them as I see them. Um, So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the potential changes that can take place in the parent-student relationship as your student leave for college. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about how to launch a resilient college student and some of the common struggles that may start to show up and how you can support them. And lastly, we will talk a little bit more about university counseling service and the service that we can offer. And as you're a student getting ready for college, there are going to be changes in the family dynamic. Student may become more independent in some ways, but may still dependent upon parents in other ways. So there's that little kind of transition period when students are exploring their independence while still are interdependent on you. And they will also be changes in communication. As your students staying on campus, you may need to rely on text messages, FaceTime, and phone calls for communication. And a lot of those like kitchen table opportunity check-ins may not be existing anymore because students are not coming home every day and you don't have that time just to do those brief check-ins. And some of you may also experience empty nest syndrome because not having your student around may be challenging for you. And you may experience loneliness, stress, or boredom at home because you don't have your uh, child with you. And oftentimes, as a parent, your instinct may tell you that you want to protect your student from getting hurt. You may want to prevent your student from making mistakes that you recognize as mistakes. And when things are difficult, it can be hard to see your student in pain or distress. You may feel a lot of urges to fix things for them. And these are all very natural parents' instincts that has helped you and your child. At the same time, as a college student, they have their own developmental goals. Um, they want to start to establish that autonomy and interdependence during college, want to foster that sense of self-efficacy, which is their abilities to know that they can complete things on their own. And this is also a period of time when they start to develop a sense of identity of who they are. Um, and college, there's not as much structure as in high school or middle school. So it is also the time where students gonna really lean on their executive functioning skills and start to practice a lot of independent decision making. And they also have a lot more opportunities socially and to foster emotional intelligence and develop maturity emotionally and also learn to develop adaptive coping and the resilience as they navigate stressful situations more independently. So for you as a parent and in your relationship with the students, it may feel like a balancing act. It may feel like you need to learn when to step in and when to step out. How can you encourage students to managing something on their own while still providing necessary support because your students are not developmentally not fully independent yet. They may still relying on you for encouragement, problem solving, or for resources. So you also want to think about how you want to allow room for trial and error. Um, a lot of times, it is very natural when you let someone that you don't want them to get hurt. But people um, do learn by experiencing things firsthand. So it is important to allow that room for your students to try things and potentially fail, to learn that process. Of course, there are certain things that you don't want them to try and error, or the consequences will be too severe if they fail. So think about what those things are and think about when you want to intervene. And where the line that is for you at your relationship. So here are some supportive questions that may be helpful for you to use when your students experience challenges or difficulties. These questions are aimed to kind of provide that support for students to problem solving more independently, while still let them know that you're there for them and you can support them. Um, so I see it as a sequence of questions. So first of all, you want to give them to students to talk about what the problem is. So what has been hard? What is the biggest challenges? Um, it helps to normalize the imperfection and gives permission to struggle. And you also always want to allow space for students to vent a little bit before going to that problem solving, just so they are able to practice how to articulate the concerns they have and how to ask for support, and also give them room to express their feelings and the struggles they're experiencing. And after that, you can move into problem solving and ask a little bit more about what resources exist for you to get help with it. So prompt them to think through before you offer solution or resource. And if your students struggle to accessing those resources or utilizing them, it is actually really helpful to kind of ask more about what's keeping them from utilizing the resources. And it's not a rhetorical question. Do not ask it as a rhetorical question. It is another skill that helps your students to develop. That is to identify the barrier and the problem solving the ways um, to accessing support. Um, I see there are some questions related to um, Q&A. We'll get to that maybe towards the end of it. I want to talk about our services. Um, so here are two common student-related concerns we often see for new students. One is feeling lonely and disconnected on campus. It is actually a really common adjustment challenge in the past few years, especially after COVID. A lot of times in college, they lost that structure of relationship building that they had when they grew up at home in their local community or in high school, where they're gonna spend a lot of time with the same group of people pretty frequently. In college, it's not structured like that. And people may also experience a lot more homesickness and can experience low mood and decreased motivation because they feel really isolated on them. So it is really important to think about how you may help your student build community on campus, to have a conversation about how they can be involved or want to be involved on campus. So I'm suggesting is not just say that, you need to go out more or you need to talk to people more. Maybe ask more specific questions about what helped them to make friends previously and how can they find a similar structure or similar environment to foster friendship again. So that process is a good way to foster that problem-solving skill. And another common kind of factor that contributing to students' academic and social stress is the fear of disappointing parents or feeling not good enough. Um, a lot of times, parents I actually heard a lot from parents that they did not impose those standards on the students, but the students will feel that they need to reach a certain expectation or perform a certain way, otherwise they will be disappointing their parents. So it is really important for you to think about how you want to talk about failure around your students, to help them to see that mistakes are expected. And as they practice being independent and start to um, like become adults, mistakes is part of the growth. Um, and help students be okay with alternative plans if their first plan or first goal was not achieved. Um, and it is really important to kind of support your students as they practice how to roll with the unexpected or when they feel they failed. Communication is another important thing to kind of figure out, preferably before you're still leave for college. To think about how you want to communicate with each other and to have agreement on how and when and um, in what way you want to communicate. And there are also things like whether or not you want to disable GPS location sharing, or when do your students or you want them to use GPS location sharing. How often would you like your student to call, and how your student would like you to check in with them or ask if they are having struggles. So having those conversations ahead of time about conversations can be really helpful. We do have a QR code with kind of a website of resources for parents, including some car ride conversation starters to for parents and students to have that conversation around communication. And we also want to encourage all of you to kind of take care of yourself as your students leaving for college. You may have mixed feelings about that, which is very normal and valid. And there are times that you may feel uncertain about how you will handle this transition or having challenges handling the transition. And you can think about what kind of barrier may come up for you and how you can take care of yourself. And another thing to think about is as your students come of age as adults, there are things that maybe there are things that you can control and there are things you cannot control. Um, and I said, when they're a child and fully relying on you, you may have a little bit more control over their like life structures, how they can potentially spend their time with phone screens, things like that. When they're adult, a lot of times that they will do their own thing, and you may not have that sense of control, and that can be anxiety provoking. And also encourage you to model that self-care for your students by practicing self-care strategies for yourself. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our services. Um, True and false. I don't think we can. Well, just answer these questions in your own head, and as we go through, you can see if you get it correct or not. So asking someone who is showing psychological distress are you thinking about suicide is a bad idea, as it can increase the likelihood that they will seriously consider suicide. True or false? Make that decision in your mind. It is actually false. Asking someone about directly about suicide will not increase the likelihood that they will consider it. It actually helps to destigmatize suicide, relieve that sense of shame, and able for you to have a conversation about whether or not they're thinking about it and how they can get support. So it is actually encouraged you directly ask about suicide. If you seek therapy at University Counseling Service, your mental health record will be part of your academic record. I mean, that's a student's record. So in your mind, say true or false. It is false. So mental health record is protected by HIPAA and it's kind of the same category as the medical records, and it will not be your students' academic records. So when your students seek counseling with us, everything is confidential. Um, if I'm concerned about my students' mental health, I can request service on my students' behalf. True or false? Make a decision in your mind. So it is false. We are a voluntary service, meaning that the student need to be willing to see us to kind of come for an appointment. So we do ask the students make the appointment, and we need to speak directly to the students. And uh, if you want to support your students making that call, you can be like in the same room and supporting them and talk them through about how to make that appointment. But our support staff will need to talk to the student to actually schedule that appointment. So UCS is the primary mental health service on campus for undergrad, graduate, and professional students and postdoc scholars. We have a professional staff consists of psychologists, social workers, licensed mental health counselors, and also therapists in training. There are three big areas of our services, including clinical service. That's usually the individual counseling, group counseling, quick access appointment, mental health navigation appointment. And the second area is outreach and prevention. Those are things like support space, workshops, and other like mental health fair. And we also have a training for graduate trainees for our therapists in training. So this is our location. We have a few different offices across campus, and our main office currently is in West Lawn over here, but we are actually moving early in the fall semester to IMU. So this will be our main office starting in the fall. And we have kinetic counselors and embedded therapists in a few different colleges and in residence halls. And if your student want to make an appointment with us, this is the kind of the flow chart to make that appointment. We do ask our students to be in the state of Iowa to in order to be seen by us because all our therapists are licensed in Iowa only. And we encourage folks to schedule and call online, to call us or schedule an appointment online. And we have a range of different services, as you can see here, and serve different functions. I think I can start to answer some of the questions in the Q&A section. So there are a couple of you asking about medication. So UCS actually does not provide psychiatric medication and we cannot provide prescriptions. If your students want to see a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse to manage prescriptions, um, you can contact the student health and the or psychiatric department at student health. Um, There's something I want to say. So it is for both managing prescription or brand new prescriptions. If your student has a relatively simple prescription medication, like for antidepressant and it's been working well, managed well, there's no complications and like students is pretty consistent with taking the medication and everything. If that's the case, actually a general physician or primary care taker of primary care provider at student house will be sufficient to provide that prescription. If student's prescription is relatively more complicated, it's not just like general anxiety or depression, there's like more complication to it. The um, kind of the management of the mental health concern kind of needs more eyes on it, or students are still trying to figure out the medication combination. In those cases, definitely schedule a psychiatric appointment. Um, so student health will be the department to look to. All right. So for our outreach and prevention services, here are some kind of highlights. We have a Fair Check Day, which is the annual mental health fair on campus. This year it's Wednesday, September 30th at Hubbard Park. And folks can come have fun while learn mental health tricks and resources. And we also have a Hope Box initiative. You can see the example of the Hope Box here. Is full of distress coping tools and the crisis resources. And students can pick one up either at our office or at residence halls, or a few other like advising offices can be really helpful when they're experiencing distress. And lastly, we also have, you can see it as a therapist office hour. It's called the Let's Talk Hawks. If students want to ask questions about counseling, get referrals, or do some quick problem solving, that's kind of drop-in friendly and you don't need to go through the clinical route of an appointment. You can just book it through the QR code and then students can talk with our therapist briefly. So these are kind of examples of the outreach and prevention services that we offer, and I think these may be helpful to know. And as I mentioned, that we provide graduate trainings for master level, doctoral level graduate students from various counseling and mental health disciplines here, and they are our therapists in training and they're supervised by licensed clinicians. Oh. And lastly, here are the crisis and time-sensitive resources available for college students. We have the UI Support and Crisis Line that's available for UI students. And there's also the National Susan Crisis Line. I think I can also answer the remaining questions. So there's one question about recommendation for continuity of care for students who already has a psychiatrist and therapist in another state. Um, so depending on I think there are a few different, excuse me, there are a few different ways to do it. If you want to, want your student to set up with us, you can, but there is kind of so there are two different options. Let me go back really quick. So at UCS, we offer brief individual counseling, meaning that typically around the brief individual counseling with us is like 3 to 8 sessions. Um, 8 session is not a hard cutoff line, but usually when folks reach 8 sessions and they feel like they would like more continued services, it usually means that their concerns need a little bit more long-term support, and we will connect them with agencies or therapists in the community who can offer that more long-term support. So depending on the needs of your student, if your student is in a pretty good state and is managing things really well, all they need is a little bit like adjustment tips and tricks to um, get adjusted to a new environment and then good to go. It will make sense to have a round of brief individual counseling with us. Um, if your students feel like, yeah, there's something that's kind of they have been seeing a therapist for pretty long term and they hope to continue to see a therapist for like continued support, I do encourage folks to think about starting with a community therapist just so that students don't need to kind of transition from one therapist to another just in a short period of time. Um, the appointment over here, mental health resource navigation. These are our case managers, and they are familiar with all the counseling resources on campus. So they will be able to, if you are like new to the state, you don't know what insurance covers in the states, like who in this community takes those insurance, how to find them. I will highly encourage your student to make an appointment with our mental health resource navigation and talk to our resource navigator, and they can provide some options for your students and help them to find out the insurance situation and how kind of walk them through how to make those appointments. Um, if you feel kind of relatively comfortable to help your student figure it out, we also have, let me see if I can, I think you can see the webinar chat, right? So there is let me put it in the chat. One web page portal that we developed that actually has the data and the information about over 300 local therapists in town in the Iowa City area, like Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty. So if you feel really comfortable with going through the process with your students and help your students to kind of reach out to establish that care, you can just like schedule that appointment and help your student get connected right there. You don't need to necessarily go with us. And your student could just start with a community provider if that's something that you feel comfortable with. I don't think there's a right or wrong to do it. Mostly it's about your comfort level of your and your student comfort level. And let me know if you have further questions about this. Um, and there's also a question about if a student has a safety plan, do you recommend that it is shared with residence hall RAs? I would say, uh, I so before we do that, I would feel pretty strongly that if a student has a safety plan and is like, in a place where is really need a safety plan to keep themselves safe, first of all, definitely set up continued care with someone, either with us or with someone in the community. And once your students like come on campus, your therapist or the student therapist should help the student to update that safety plan. Because they will be in a new environment. They're gonna be like things gonna look a little bit different. So definitely the safety plan will be updated And if the student live in residence halls, then it's a good idea to think about how to incorporate the support they have in residence halls into the safety plan. Um, so after that, like after that's integrated, then I think that depending on what's needed, that the student can share the safety plan with RA, especially if like there's like a step there, say that, RA is part of their safety plan or calling RAs or talk to RAs may be part of it, then yes. So I do think that RA will be a good resource and in the same time, having that continued care and also updating the safety plan once they move here is something that needs to be probably done before you reach out to RAs. And we do have two therapists in residence halls at Catlett. And a lot of time the students can reach out directly to them to kind of schedule appointment or kind of see them for therapy. Again, it will be a brief individual counseling, but if you feel like they need that kind of support for the transition, it's totally like makes sense and it's totally appropriate. Um, what else do I? Um, what services can you provide a student that has OCD issues? Um, so depends. We do have individual counseling and have therapists who have expertise in OCD. Their openings can shift depending on the time of the year. And there are also community providers who have expertise on OCD issues. So depending on really the needs of the student and what service feels most accessible and the resources that you have, you can either the student can either schedule an appointment with us for around a brief individual counseling to specifically focus on OCD issues, or they can schedule an appointment with a local therapist to work on OCD issues. The link I send out, the community provider database, there's one filter that's specifically about therapist competency area. So if you know that you want a therapist who have that expertise in OCDs, you can select that and it will generate the therapists in the community who have that expertise. And if the students are interested to, at least start with us or want to have around a brief individual counseling with us, we do encourage them to reach out early in the semester. Do not wait until like in the middle of semester or in the final months of semester because oftentimes there's not enough room to kind of work through issues or that it may take a little bit longer for them to get in to see a therapist. So just want to also let you all know that. Um, can student access resource and navigation before coming to Iowa? Um, Let me think through really quick. So what you can do is that you can schedule an appointment with us as long as that appointment is the first day of their enrollment. So we cannot see students who are not enrolled yet, but students can reach out and schedule appointment as long as the appointment is on the date when they're enrolled. Um, I can also share our unless that student is here on campus early for like specialized kind of some of the training related things, in that case they can. But we do require folks to be enrolled to start CS. If um, There are resources that the students and parents can utilize. Like it's kind of more open access resource on our end related to resource navigation. Let me just find that service really quick so you'll have it. Um, so other than um, the community provider database, we also have this page about how to find a therapist in the community. So if you guys want to, start looking into options before students came to Iowa, these are two great resources to utilize. Um, but if they want to schedule a mental health resource navigation appointment, they do need to be enrolled for that. I think I answered all the questions in that's sent over. If your question's not answered, please let me know. If you have more questions, also let me know. Um, just gonna share our information. This QR code is our website. There are a lot of resources there if you want to go and check it out. And we're open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. during academic year semesters. And I'll give you a couple more minutes. Um, I'll also put our webpage in the chat. So if you have any kind of more questions, usually you can find the answers in our webpage. All right. I don't think we have any more questions. Oh, thank you all for coming and hope you have a good rest of summer. Take care. Bye.